Welcome to the spam channel of Professor Sky. So this is the channel where I talk about stuff that is not directly related to new music releases. And it's a little bit of a borderline case. I'm going to be talking about the Kanye West interview, or the Ye interview, with the Drink Champs on the Revolt channel of YouTube. It was released last night. I've spent the last 2.5 hours preparing lesson plans and listening to this interview, and I have a lot of thoughts on it, and I want to share it. So I'm putting it on my spam channel because most of the thoughts are kind of philosophical in general, more about the position of Kanye in society and in history as opposed to Kanye the musician, although it will also be quite music-centered. Now let me tell you some things that this is not going to be about. This is not going to be a hot take analysis. This is not going to be a reaction. I don't give reactions, I give thoughts. Okay? If you'd like some of my thoughts, stick around and hear what I'm going to say. So I'm not going to be talking about any of the outrageous things that he said. Cancel Black History. Right? Cancel Black History Month. Let's have Black Future Month. Interesting idea. I'm going to ignore the fact that he smoked weed on camera and that he called Nori, one of the hosts, his Joe Rogan. Again, that's a real insult to Noriega. I'm not going to talk about his accidental haircut. I'm not going to talk about how he had to choose between Elon Musk and Nikola Tesla, and he said he'd prefer Musk, which I think is kind of a not fair question, because I'm married to a Serbian scientist, and even I don't really understand the importance of Nikola Tesla, so I don't know why Kanye would. Another kind of side note of these things I'm not going to talk about, the fact that Kanye seems to look up to Elon Musk is a bit weird, because Musk is kind of he's kind of a nobody. I mean, he's very important and very rich, but he's not some great genius. I mean, Elon could be lucky to be as important or influential as Kanye. That's another thing. I'm not going to talk about that. I'm not going to talk about his ramblings about the 12 tribes of the 12 tribes of the Hebrew. I'm not going to talk about this genocide he's talking about, his many confusing, unclear references to 1984. I'm not going to talk about his seemingly pro-life, yet not necessarily anti-choice position on abortion. I'm not going to talk about his incoherent ramblings even on 808 drum machines. And I'm certainly not going to talk about his insistence on the importance of astrology. Jesus Christ. There's one thing that's going to get Kanye to lose me. I'm not going to talk about all that. Instead, I want to pick apart some things that he said and study it. Because this is, I don't know if it's the best Kanye interview I've ever seen. I think it's up there with some of the other more famous ones. But I think we really need to spend some time with a couple of things he said. One of them, I want to take and share with my philosophy department. So I am not a philosophy expert, okay? I studied philosophy. I teach a little bit of philosophy. But that's not my area of expertise. That said, when Kanye said, quote, "We are all born white supremacist, homophobic, and racist," I think we need to put that in context. I think we need to really sit with that thought in comparison to other philosophical thoughts. See, most of us are basically what they call empiricist. We know things by learning them, by doing them. All right. Sort of alongside this are maybe some thoughts adjacent to one of my favorite philosophers, Rousseau, who said that we are all born good, but society corrupts us. So what do we do with this concept that we are born white supremacist, homophobic, and racist? Well, what Kanye appears to be talking about here is what philosophers call a priori knowledge. Knowledge that does not come from experience. Knowledge which is always in our minds, already there. In this way, he's perhaps more similar to Plato. More similar perhaps to Descartes, who both believed that some higher power put ideas in our mind before we're born. Okay, you can read that in Phaedo by Descartes, and by Plato, and a lot of Descartes' writing. This concept that these things exist within us. And that belief is called innatist. But I don't think that white supremacy and homophobia are quite on that level. I think it might be more interesting to see it as more of a social image of what is called nativist, which is associated with being a natist, but this is the idea that there's actual structures in our mind at birth, full structures. When Kanye says we are born white supremacist, he's saying that the structures of white supremacy for all of us, he's not saying white people, he's saying all people are born white supremacist. In that way, he reminds me most perhaps of Noam Chomsky. I don't have a picture of Chomsky or a book by Chomsky. Sorry. I did publish an article where I refuted something he said about a 17th century grammarian. But, Chomsky believed in something called universal grammar. The idea there's certain tenets of grammar that we are born with, not that we learn. So what do we do with this thought? We are all born white supremacist, homophobic, and racist. This reminds me of yet another person who's hanging around my office, Simone de Beauvoir, and her belief that women are not born, they are made. What I find so interesting is this concept that all of these structures, it's not that we're born bad, it's not that Rousseau is wrong, but that all these structures are not learned. It's very complicated. I don't think I agree with it, but I think it's fascinating. And I love the fact that he separated white supremacy and racism. Those are two separate things, right? You can be racist and white supremacist, but they aren't necessarily always the same, and homophobic in there. So I don't know. I heard him just kind of throw that out there. And I think we should spend some more time taking it seriously as a perspective. Can we have some kind of nativist philosophy on inequality? Now, to do so removes a lot of agency, right? That's part of the problem. It removes a lot of our ability to determine our own fate. Empiricism is much more comforting. The idea that we can do things and that we can learn things and that things weren't always there. But on the other hand, if we consider these structures to be native to our brains, a priori, then perhaps we would take the challenge of fighting them more seriously. It's not just that your dad's racist and your mom's racist, so you're going to be racist. It's that we are all. Malcolm X is born white supremacist, racist, and homophobic. RuPaul is born racist, white supremacist, and homophobic. I'm picking some weird examples here. I am born that way. You are born that way. Again, the whole show is called Drink Champs. It's about drinking and getting loose and talking about things. But in this, he made a fairly interesting point. He also consistently referred to life as being like a video game. And he said something which I thought was really beautiful, that like losing is fun in a video game. And so he takes losing in life to be fun as well. He's not much of a motivational speaker all the time, but that I think is a very motivational way to think. He spends a lot of time in this interview talking about the statue of the artist. They revisit the incident with Kanye, with Taylor Swift, and he emphasizes that it's really about defending an artist. That he didn't think that anybody should win anything for music videos if it wasn't Beyonce winning for the video Single Ladies. That's why I think that moment's so important and why I think it's so great. People keep framing it as an older person bullying a younger woman. Okay, I get that, and they frame it racially and in terms of gender dynamics and all that stuff, and that's a totally valid way to interpret it. But the other way, if we really focus on the idea of Kanye not just as a influential billionaire, African-American, polemicist, all that, if we focus on him just as one of the few people, along with, I would argue, George Lucas, basically just those two, who consistently fights for art and artists, their right to be free and their right to create. He makes it explicit that that's what that's about. I also find it interesting that even though he refers to himself multiple times as a rapper, he says that when people call him a rapper, he hears the N-word. And I love that distinction, because he doesn't want to be limited. That's why I call him an artist. When people ask me why do I love Kanye so much, I tell them, well, he's not the best producer, he's not the best rapper, he's not the best fashion designer, he's not the best this, that, but he is the best artist alive. Speaking of art, he references buying a sheep from Damien Hirst. As an art historian who really likes Damien Hirst, I think that's kind of a funny flex move. I think, so he talks a lot about his relationship with Drake and the beef between him and Drake. For art historians, this is the best flex. Because he's saying that Damien Hirst did an album cover for Drake. And if you don't know Damien Hirst, he's one of the most influential and important artists in the world. British guy. He's most famous for putting a great white shark in formaldehyde. I saw it in New York when it was there at the Brooklyn Museum, and just an absolutely amazing show. Just a great artist, very forward-thinking, very of the moment. So, like, he's talking all about how he's not actually attacking Drake. But if you know art history, and you love art history like I do, the fact that he's like, yeah, Damien Hirst did something for him, It wasn't that good. But oops, I just bought two great pieces from Damien Hirst. Like he's actually flexing his taste. He's flexing his knowledge, but he's doing it in a subtle way, and he's doing it in an audience, right? He's surrounded by people who aren't art history majors. He's doing it in a very interesting way. I also like the way he says he could build a dinosaur out of a dinosaur bone. I hope that makes its way into his rhymes. Another thing that he emphasized here, that he often emphasizes, is fashion and self-esteem, the link between those things. I'm sure there have been essays done on this, but I really think that would be a very interesting analysis of how people whose self-esteem is destroyed by society, right? The white supremacy and the racism of society, how that can be overcome through fashion. One thing that really struck me here that I didn't always get, Kanye is very smart, but he also is very unafraid of presenting himself as not being smart. He's totally fine with saying things wrong and not caring about how he says them. He says over and over again how he's not good at reading, right? He called the TV show Silicon Valley over and over again, even though it's Silicon Valley. But one thing he definitely is a student of hip-hop. I think that's what makes this so interesting, is because it's with N.O.R.E., also known as Noriega, part of Capone and Noriega, rap group from the 90s. And at one point, Kanye said, I could get into the science of rap and music. But then he was cut off by Noriega for a stupid A or B question. I wanted to jump through the screen and be like, can we just let Kanye talk about the science of rap and music? What I found interesting was he was talking about how Drake, the way Kanye kept talking about it was changing the algorithm. But really what he was describing was what artists are shaping the culture. If there's one thing that Kanye, it doesn't matter what you think about Kanye. You can love Kanye or hate Kanye. But what he does is he shapes culture. You ever been on a quiet lake or river or canal, and a motorboat goes by? It doesn't matter how quiet it is, your boat is rocking. Every single thing Kanye does has ripple effects and changes all of society. So what I loved is in this interview, he went out of his way to explain the other people that are doing what he does. He praises Drake as being a person who changed the way people make music. He cited Future. He talked about Atlanta taking over. It's very clear that he actually studies rap. And even though he did an entire album with Nas, and even though he claims that Nas is his favorite rapper, he explains exactly how Nas fell off in terms of popularity and Jay-Z didn't. He goes to a specific moment where Jay-Z was able to adapt his style to sound more like the new style, and how Nas couldn't do that. Did you know that he was thinking, I know that he thinks a lot about music, but I didn't know he thought that much about other rappers' music. It was awesome to hear. Also, turns out Mobb Deep is his favorite group. That's interesting. I wouldn't have predicted that either. I like how he talks about how Scarface, the rapper, added to the flow. It's such a very specific thing where this is what I try and do in my main channel, Professor Sky's Record Review. I try to study hip-hop from this level of how do things change? Where do they change? Where do these little things happen? It's clear that he's able to analyze this one moment, this one flow, and then he talks about how Jay-Z adopted it, and then it goes from there. But this is just in the middle of a 2.5-hour interview. And yeah, he's also talking about a whole bunch of other weird random stuff that doesn't make any sense, and running for president, and being mad at John Legend for voting for Joe Biden, and just all this stuff. It's all such an amazing mix. That's part of why I want to have this video here, to kind of throw it in here and get to what makes it so interesting. And when he has all of his, part of what made Donda so great was all of these guest appearances. And it's clear that Kanye wasn't just, looking at a checklist. He didn't have some A&R say, these are the hot people now. He talks about how Lil Baby and Da Baby changed the game and about what they brought to his album. He talked about discovering 5 Foreign because of listening to Funk Flex. He actually let us in to the process of Donda without telling us that. Because we've already had the 3 album, the 3 listening parties, or 4 if you were lucky enough to be at the private one. But here we're actually learning a lot about his artistic process for how he chooses the people he works with. I did love the bit about Silicon Valley, talking about the opening episode where Kid Rock performs for everybody and says, that's the poorest guy there. Kid Rock is the poorest person in this room. There's a lot of emphasis about ownership and about the importance of... It's funny because he would sort of go back and forth between trying to identify as an African-American pioneer while also downplaying the importance of race and fairly confusing messages there. but he's very interested in being the person on top. He closes out the whole interview by talking about we shouldn't be clapping when people get a job for Louis Vuitton. We need to be clapping for the people who own Louis Vuitton. A little thematic thing popped up here, which is about drinking fountains. So on New Slaves, he already talked about how his mother grew up at a time where she had to drink from a different water fountain than from white people during segregation. But he also talks about how water fountains are going away and they're being replaced by plastic bottles, and that's all about capitalism. To that end, this is what I drink out of. This is my Radiohead water bottle from 2008 tour. I have 3 of these. This is my second one. I'm saving my third one. And it actually says right on there, 15 billion plastic bottles of water are sold each year. This was made to fight that. So it's interesting because both Radiohead and Kanye, my 2 favorite artists, are coming together and using plastic bottles of water as the symbol of capitalistic waste. Isn't that interesting? Right? I mean, look at this interview. This crazy interview. He's drinking Japanese whiskey and getting goofy and just keeps saying nice things about Elon Musk, right? Keeps saying nice things about Joe Rogan. Kanye, you're so much better than them. but at the same time, we had this whole theme here about water, about the existence of water. I really liked how he describes the idea of doing a versus. So if you don't know, versus is this thing that's happening where rap artists come together and they compare their catalogs, and said that he would need like 5 different people to go against him. And I think it's true. I think it's fascinating how he's said, it would have to be Virgil for fashion, and Drake for changing the culture, and Kendrick for bars, and J. Cole for backpacks. He also did a thing which I really appreciate, which is something that whenever I talk to people about Kanye, and if you know anything about me, it's my favorite subject. Right? Kanye in episode 1 of Star Wars are my 2 favorite things to talk about, primarily because they both show what happens when artists are given control, in a good way in both cases. I love that he always gives credit. So he's famous for giving credit to someone for a single drum hit on a song. And here he actually gives 90s rapper Beanie Siegel credit for the word Yeezy, for being called Yeezy. And he keeps saying, I owe Beanie money and I need to pay him. What kind of billionaire is like upset about not paying somebody enough money for the credit they get? While at the same time, he attacks fellow producer Just Blaze for copying him on the Blueprint and saying that he should get more credit for Blueprint. It's part of what makes Kanye such a challenging figure is he's so humble. That's a very humble thing to say. Someone just called him Yeezy and he could just let it go and just whatever. But instead he says that, while at the same time, Just Blaze is amazing. His beats were amazing. Another thing that makes him so controversial and why he's such a great artist is at one point he says that he doesn't like subliminal things. He doesn't like that. He likes things that are overt. And that's part of his problem, is he just says things, he just keeps saying things, and he doesn't have any filter, and he's rich enough not to have a filter. And I think that's why we need him. I think that's why we need a Picasso. I think that's why we need artists like him who are free, who have their power that they got through their creativity and genius, and use that power to be free. Obviously, it's different. When the person who's free comes from a culture which has been enslaved and oppressed for as long as they've been in here, right? It's very different than George Lucas. This concept of freedom. God damn. Is there probably not. Hip-hop studies are going to be a major in all colleges by the time your kids are in college. So just forget that. That's absolutely in the future. There might even be just straight-up Kanye studies. Or he will probably end up becoming the most important figure because of how he's able to rap in all these themes. There are also some generally funny moments. There's a thing about Kanye where he's not very funny. He doesn't have a good sense of humor about himself. And that's probably his least likable trait. I think that's why he's so easy to hate. If he could just laugh at himself, he would be more loved. But if he could laugh at himself, he wouldn't be him. But there were some generally funny moments, like Kanye referenced the song Oh No by Noriega. Oh no! One of my favorite songs from the 90s. He talked about the difference between Pharrell and Timbaland and said that Timbaland is better because he's from Virginia, but they're both from Virginia. And just the way they laughed, you know, like that's where he's actually laughing. Like he made a mistake and he was not very smart, right? He should have known that, but he didn't, and he just let it roll. And then when he's trying to describe the difference between Puffy and Dre and why does he like Puff Daddy more, he does this little dance describing why he likes Puff Daddy more. And it's a little glimpse of a little bit of humor which can exist. So there's my review of an interview. My interview review. Is that what this channel is for? I don't know. Did you like this video? Did you watch the interview? Can you please comment? And I'm getting close to 1,000 subscribers on my spam channel, which not to say, you know, it's my spam channel. Pretty cool. So please do subscribe. Please do comment. I would like this to be a place where we can talk about this interview, what's good and bad, and you know, oh, is he going to get back together with Kim? I wasn't even listening to those parts. Okay. Until next time, across all channels, there's the camera.